My name's Randal Breen. Myself and my wife, Janita, and our two children, Eli and Bridie, we run a little farming operation, a stacked integrated farm is what we call it, on Bundjalung country, which is just in the southeast Queensland region, just over the Great Dividing Range, just sort of west of Brisbane, about 2 hours west of Brisbane. We sit at about 650 metres elevation. We're a dry temperate area. For those people that are into holistic management, we would be classified as a brittle tending environment. Average rainfall is around 600 to 700 millimetres a year. We haven't seen that very often. This year has been probably the first year in our 8 years of farming that we've hit the average. It's a nice year this year. We've got some beautiful green grass around. So as a farming operation, our main enterprises are pastured poultry for egg production, beef. So we run a Brangus cattle stud, and so we're raising animals for seed stock production for other breeders, as well as producing grass-fed and finished beef, and then pastured pork. So they're the three main enterprises, but we also do opportunistic small cropping and do a lot of cover cropping. So we're on our landscape, we're 350 acres. Approximately half of that has been heavily farmed. We're on the Darling Downs, so it's historically had a lot of heavy tillage and chemical use. Our farm was no different. We came here in 2014 and it had been under the plough for 120 years prior to us arriving. So there was a fair bit of work to do in terms of land regeneration. We produce eggs, beef and pork primarily, and we sell into Brisbane is our main outlet, but all of southeast Queensland. And we probably have three main distribution models. One which is wholesale into cafes and restaurants, and other online ethical food distributors. We have our own online shop, which sort of runs on a weekly cycle. And then finally, our main one, which is the one we're most passionate about, is our CSA, our Community Supported Agriculture Program, where we have people sign up for a period of 6 to 12 months, some of which have been with us for 5 years since we started our CSA program. And so they're our three main methods. We aim to direct market everything we produce. We sort of capture the best return for our efforts. Because we're very much a small operation, particularly in the early days, we knew that we probably couldn't produce enough product to just be, and because our passion was to be 100% farmers. So we weren't looking for this to be a supplementary income. We wanted to make 100% of our living income off farming enterprise for both of us. So we knew that given that we're only on 350 acres, that we had to try to maximise the return for each product we produced. So that was probably the first thing. And also probably from a values point of view, we felt strongly about trying to engage with the community that we feed. So on our farm, we've developed the 4 goods sort of guiding principles that helps us make our decision. And that sort of is what has helped guide us to coming to a point where we want to direct market as much as we could. So those 4 goods are everything that we do in our decision-making process on the farm. We make sure that it's good for the animal, good for the land, good for the farmer, and ultimately good for the people that we feed. I think the whole COVID pandemic and what we've seen over the last few years has really driven people to stop and really reflect on how they're sourcing and where they're getting their food from. Not only in terms of the health, but also sustained supply. Like we've saw in this industrial model where, everything's sort of going in through a funnel to a processor as a protein producer. The abattoirs seem to be the sticking point for meat processing. And then all of a sudden we have a pandemic and then everything shuts down. So it wasn't about that we didn't have supply. There was plenty of food there, but we couldn't get it to the consumer. So for us, when we've built this direct relationship with the people that we feed, we can even talk through those conversations. People become more aware. And so part of what we're doing is more than just selling food, we're building relationships. And I think what we're seeing is more and more people are looking to engage in where their food comes from. And that's really exciting. CSA stands for Community Supported Agriculture. And so the concept of a CSA, put simply, people see it as a membership-based food supply system, but it's actually quite a bit more than that. So the idea of a CSA is that both the consumer and the producer, so the farmer and the eater, are joining together to share the risk of production of food. But the concept that we're using is where we engage with the people that we feed. They come in and they sign up for a period of time, 6 months to 12 months for us. And then what they're doing is they're committing to pay a monthly fee. And each month we then return to them some product from our production. Now, sometimes in a vegetable CSA, to sort of explain how that would work, say they had a lower yield from apples or pumpkins or whatever vegetables they were producing, then you would get a bit less in your box. But then on the flip side, you also get to partake in the abundance. So if you have a cracking season and you have more product, then the eater actually receives more for the money that they've spent. So there's that sort of risk sharing. For us as protein producers, it's probably not as much as more or less, but more around maybe there's less fat coverage on the beef, or there's a slightly lower yield. And so what it provides for me, the farmer, is that I get stability. So I can say, righto, for the next 12 months, I've got this many people signed up to my CSA program. So this is how many animals I need to produce for the year. And so I can actually plan out my program, and it's a preset price. So we're not entering into this volatility of a market where we might produce a product only to then have to sell it back into the market at less than what it's cost me to produce. So what we sit down with the people that we feed, and we talk it out at the start of the year about what's this going to cost for us, how that's going to look. Are you comfortable with this price? And then we lock that in for the year, and away we go together. And so it's really about building that relationship. And so over and above the food production, those members of our CSA program actually come to the farm and partake in the process of producing their own food. So only last week, we had a whole heap of our CSA members come to the farm and helped us plant trees. So we're in the process of revegetating some of the heavily farmed land, getting trees back into the landscape, and our CSA members come and do that. So it's an amazing, more than just commerce, that it's building of that relationship. And it has been quite an amazing journey for us to engage with our, particularly when we went through 2019, was the height of the drought here. We had 180 millimetres of rain for the entire 12 months of the year, and we're really in quite a desperate situation. And we sat down with our CSA members to talk about how we would address that. And a number of those CSA members said, we'll continue paying our monthly fee for our CSA membership, and you don't have to feed us, because they had taken on the responsibility of what it means to produce food in a drying climate. So yeah, quite an amazing journey. I guess key advantage for the farmer is that he has direct connection with the people that they're feeding, so that there's relationship there. It's not just a farmer on his own bashing around the paddock hoping that there's going to be someone to feed at the other end that'll get a price that he needs. So we're taking out that volatility of the market. So he gets a predetermined price prior to starting his production process. And it can't be understated how valuable relationship of the process is. So the relationship with the people that you're feeding, because if you're in a period of drought, and we know how horrific mental health was for farmers during the drought we've just had, when you've got people calling you up and seeing how you're doing, and even popping a few bucks into your bank account to buy hay, all of a sudden you aren't on your own. So that's a huge benefit. And then for the consumer, they get to know the farmer. So we use a phrase, and it's used quite a bit, know your farmer, know your food. So you get to, the consumer gets to, the eater gets to engage directly with the person that's producing it, the landscape that it's on, and even the animals, for us as protein producers, even the animals that they will ultimately get sustenance from, is they can come and see them and see how they live and ensure that the welfare that we claim is actually real. You know, even as we're trying to build sort of little, we call it an uneconomy, you know, a biodiversified uneconomy that sits outside of the broader economic model that we have to operate in. There's still influences from outside. So we can't live in a pipe dream that somehow we're going to create this microcosm that is not vulnerable to market forces externally. That's just a reality. You know, we've produced less calves this year coming out of the drought because we had to destock to look after our landscape. So we've had to go to the market to buy additional livestock to meet our CSA and our other demand. So then we've had to have that conversation with our eaters. Well, we're going to have to put the price up, not because we've had to source product from outside. So there's I think it's really important not to say, well, if you do a CSA, you're going to be fine. You're going to be home and hosed. You have to constantly be thinking about it. But I also think what is beautiful about a CSA model or supplying locally, and this might, you know, we were talking about export, it probably challenges that a little bit, because the whole concept of putting the hand of the producer in the hand of the consumer, you're removing all that fat in the middle. That unfortunately it's the farmer and the end eater that has to pay for that middle bit, that often that's where a lot of the fat gets lost, if you know what I mean. So one thing we talk about is that if you can put that, every hand that touches the food we produce that isn't the farmer or the end eater, waste is created. So if we look at an environmental impact, the less hands that are playing with that food along the chain, the less environmental impact we're going to have. Firstly, because the farmer can generally use 99.9% of any product that isn't consumed can come back onto the farm as a resource. We spend a lot of time collecting waste stream or food waste from processors in Brisbane to come back and feed through our pigs or create hot compost. And that's a resource that in reality should be going back to the farm that it was originally grown on, to return that nutrient back to the soil. And so as you build those close and local relationships, you start to reduce your cost of production. And so that's a win for the farmer, but also we're having a positive net impact environmentally as well. Okay, so our main customers for us, I think direct marketing can be a challenge for someone that's a long way from a major centre, and that's something that has to be really explored for those guys. So we're within 2 hours, and when we bought this farm, that was a very calculated decision to buy our farm within 2 hours of Brisbane. So 90%, 80% of our product is sold into families and households in the Brisbane region. And then we're slowly building stuff within our immediate community within sort of 15 minutes to half an hour's drive of the farm, but majority of it. So that's something that has to be considered. We're very aware that a majority of our customers are pretty well heeled. You know, it's the middle class and up. With a little bit more disposable income that can, because of the price and the way in which we produce our food, we have to ask a little more for it. But we have other things within our model that allows us to also support people that, because we believe that good, healthy food should be accessible to everybody. So we run some programs where some of our CSA members will actually donate money towards boxes that we can gift to people doing it tough at the moment and that sort of thing. So one of the things we're pretty big on is transparency. And I think the agricultural industry has a long way to go in terms of transparency. And so when we try to conceal some of the realities of the farming experience, people fill the gaps in for themselves. And so therefore we have issues of people making assumptions on what's going on the farm when we as farmers, we're we're vulnerable to the realities of nature, and nature's not always pretty. Nature's not always forgiving, and so sometimes I see within our industry we tend to not talk about those things, and hopefully that and because they're hard things to talk about. Whereas we try to be as transparent as possible as we can and talk about our whole story. So we use a lot of social media, and we tell our story, the whole picture. And so therefore, I think that draws people to us because of the transparency that we're trying to provide. So that's probably the biggest way. And then social media, we try to keep a pretty good website for people to get onto, and we have a newsletter that we provide, a weekly newsletter, and every quarter we do a bit more of an in-depth rundown on how the year's traveling, and then at the end of the year we do a big newsletter. So we're really focused on telling our story, and I appreciate that a lot of people feel that gets pretty intimidating, but my encouragement is just everybody has a good story to tell, and people want to hear it. When you're farming in the landscape, particularly if you're seeking to be regenerative and sustainable, or we use the word agroecological, people want to hear that story. Your consumers really are hungry to hear what's going on farms. They are multiple. It's as a small farm, probably the biggest challenge is distribution. It's probably where we find the hardest in terms of viability, and I think most farmers you talk to that are direct marketing on a smaller scale, it's something that's really challenging. So we deliver all of our product ourselves. We don't use external distributors. Again, it comes back to that trying to keep our hand and the end consumer's hand together. And so there's just such a huge price barrier in terms of trying to engage external logistics to distribute small scale packages, particularly because we're dealing with protein. It's got to be kept cold the whole time. So we own a small fridge truck, and we do our distribution on a Friday and a Saturday every week. But they are long, tiresome days. And we're still seeking a solution. And I personally believe there's a way for small scale farmers to collaborate together to distribute their produce. It's astounding as we're seeing the growth of this industry, particularly small scale direct market farmers. You know, the race of fridge trucks hooting down the highway, all heading to the same direction, are half full, because we still have a competitive mindset within the farming industry. Whereas if we can break that competitive mindset and start to build a collaborative mindset, there should be no reason why my box of eggs that's going to Cafe A can't be sitting next to someone else's box of eggs that they've produced in the same way, delivered by one person. If you know what I mean? So we should have one truck full of different producers that are like-minded, distributing that throughout. But there's a lot of stuff there that still has to be worked through, I think. You know, I dream of a time when, a truck can be managed by farmers, delivered to the market together, and sort of eliminate, because, you know, even environmentally, there's an issue there when we're claiming high ecological credentials, but yet we're all taking half-filled diesel burning fridge trucks to markets. Eggs is probably the one thing we supply on that level. Our beef and pork, probably because of the scale and the demand that we experience, we haven't come to a point where we need to. We're actually in the process so hopefully within the next 3 to 4 months, we'll have on-farm processing for our beef and pork. So we're just in the process of building an on-farm boning and packing room. So currently we're using an independent butcher who processes our meat products for us, but we're wanting to bring that in-house, only because at the moment we've sort of reached as much growth as we can with that guy, and so it just came to a point where it made sense. And also it will enable us to value add some of our products ourselves and sort of be able to further extract a bit more profitability out of our produce. Yeah, so we work collaboratively with another pig producer and another beef producer who are just really wanting to just breed and sell, but are conscious that they probably don't want to enter the mainstream market with their product because they're not rewarded for the extra work that they do to pasture raise or grass finish or, you know, raise them chemical free. So what's been great is that we've been able to collaborate to buy either their weaner steers off them and to further meet the market demand that we've got. And so that enables us to build scale without us having to go and buy more land. And also at the same time, working collaboratively with like-minded farmers. And for us, we're passionate about how do we find scale in a regenerative system, because often it's been sort of looked at as a what would be the word, a cottage industry, whereas really, if we're going to have viability environmentally and in terms of the whole movement, we have to show how this can be scaled, and also so it can still be accessible for people on a smaller scale, but be able to generate that collaborative scale. My background, my mother was a farmer's daughter, but I grew up in town, but had a fair bit of exposure to agriculture through her family lineage. But realistically, Janita and I are first-generation farmers. I've got a background in community development, as has Janita. And yeah, 2009, we bought a small acreage and went out there and sort of started to play around and cut our teeth, and went and heard a whole heap of things by the likes of Joel Salatin and Colin Seiss and Darren Doherty, all these guys that were sort of talking regeneratively back then. And then we sort of launched a pastured egg business on that small property. It was 50 acres, and it sort of took off. And then from there, 2014, mid 2014, we bought this bigger place and decided to go head first into it and see if we could make it work on a 100% income generation. And yeah, for the last 5 years, that's what it's done. Yeah, and that's something we've done. Because we haven't come to it with capital, so the farm itself has had to fund the expansion. So and so that's hence you do it a lot slower. Like we haven't been able to come and just appear on the scene. We've had to grow slowly as we've been able to expand. So we started with 250 laying hens, and we've now got we got up to 4,000, but we've come back to 2,500 hens. We've grown our breeding herd and the same as our pigs. So yeah, it's just been a slow organic process. We've learned along the way. We've learned a lot of things the hard way. But yeah, it's been an amazing journey, that's for sure. My first thing would be, don't be afraid to collaborate. Be willing to be open and share, both with other farmers and also tell your story. And so, when you're doing it tough, let the people that you're telling your story to know that, because that's as valuable as telling them all the wins. And yeah, just keep going. I think Joel Salatin talked about, someone asked him how he made it through the whole thing, is he just got up one more time. And so sometimes that's what you've just got to keep doing when you're pulling your hair out. And I would also say that it's a challenging prospect. There's no silver bullet there. And particularly when you're seeking to farm in partnership with the landscape. So you're trying to build a regenerative model that is patient and attentive to what the landscape is asking for. That slows the whole process down. And it doesn't necessarily mean that the whole way along the way you're going to get rewarded with more yield or healthier livestock. But as that soil and that landscape heals, sometimes that brings out some of the sickness within the landscape, and you cop the rewards of that, or the negative outcomes. So you're in that healing process, and so you've got to try to ride that out. And so my encouragement to other farmers is, don't feel as if you haven't got it right because something's going wrong. You may well just be doing it right because something's going wrong. But no, I think we really love the journey we've been on. And, you know, it's putting your head down and just plow, keep going, and building relationships with like-minded individuals, seeking them out and building those relationships is so important, because that, and, you know, like we were talking about the CSA model, it's such a valuable process in the whole thing, because you don't, it's not like you're out on your own banging away. There's people there that sort of waving flags from the sidelines, pushing you on. So yeah, that's a highly valuable part. So if you can start your CSA as early as you can, I think that's a huge plus.